Down Under Dynasty with your host Ben Dubin at Life from the Ben. With me today, as always, Matt Hatton at FF Doormat. How are you today, Matt?
Mate, I'm doing wonderfully well. Happy Sunday. About to come out of lockdown in New South Wales. Pretty happy.
It's fantastic news. And Mark Bull at Mark Bull is here. How are you, Mark?
Yeah, much the same. Back to work tomorrow, back to actually being face-to-face with people. So we'll see how that goes. But, yeah, happy to be here chatting some football.
I'm sure the people are missing your face, Bully.
Mate, jump onto YouTube to see those guns. Tell you what, it's pretty impressive.
It was meant to rain here today, but it doesn't look like it's warm and sunny out there. It'll be the beach after this, I reckon.
It's meant to rain here too. It's only supposed to be 14 degrees, but it looks quite a bit considerably warmer.
It's meant to always rain in Melbourne, isn't it?
No.
How are you doing, Eddie?
Good, mate. Good. Just pondering along, doing my thing. Loving life. Enjoying the NFL season. Losing in some leagues I thought I'd be winning. Winning in some leagues I thought I'd be losing. You know? So, yeah, just taking it as it comes. Just taking it as it comes.
Season gone already.
Quarter of the season is gone.
Can you believe it?
No, I cannot believe it. You know, we wait all this time for the NFL season to get here. And before we know it, it just flies by.
Yeah, it really does start to sort of fly now, like especially once you start to get to buys and stuff like that. All of a sudden, you're at the playoffs, and now's when you've really got to make some. Probably ideally 2 weeks ago, but now's when you've really got to make that decision. Are you going for it? Are you pulling the pin, or you're sitting there in the middle?
Yeah, definitely going to discuss that today.
Yeah,
but first, what we were going to do is we were going to go over the top scorers in your PPR leagues, which is at each position, and just see, you know, at this point, who's for real, who isn't for real, who we're buying, who we're selling. So We've all got the list up in front of us. So what position do you want to start with, guys?
We'll start at quarterback.
Quarterback.
Yeah.
Most important position, because just so people know, we're talking Superflex. We're pretty much always talking Superflex here. Isn't that right, gentlemen?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got one QB league, and I'm happy to leave it at that way.
All right. All right. So I'll start with you, Bull.
Yep.
Looking at the top 12 fantasy quarterbacks based off this Fantasy Pros scoring leaders, who do you think is somebody new to the mix who you think is real? And is there anybody there who you think doesn't belong?
Well, I mean, there's a couple there. There's one really easy one for who doesn't belong. Daniel Jones doesn't belong, and Sam Darnold belongs. And I think we're finally seeing Sam Darnold what we thought. It took us a little bit longer to get there, but you know, he's managed to escape New York, and he's really showing out. I mean, he's even getting out and rushing for touchdowns now. I think he's had rushing touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. So, whereas Daniel Jones is running around trying to save his life. So I think they're the outliers for me. Everything else there looks pretty standard.
So you don't see any potential for Daniel Jones if he got himself into a better situation like Darnold did to improve his take? You don't think he's as talented as Darnold? I don't. I just put that there, but I just thought I'd ask the question.
I think New York fans thought it was a bad pick when it happened. And I think all that, you know, what's this, his third or fourth season? And I think all we've seen is that they were right. He just, I mean, the thing is, Sam Darnold came into the NFL with an elite resume. And I think he had 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years and 2 head coaches. And it was just and I think we're seeing with Zach Wilson now, that organization just isn't a well-run organization. Zach Wilson he almost looks like you've replaced Sam Darnold with him. Like he's suffering from the same problems there. And you've got to go at some point, you look at Mac Jones. Mac Jones has gone into that offense and he's looked composed and prepared and steady. Zach Wilson's gone into that organization and he looked panicked and hurried and all things we never saw in college.
In fairness, though, a lot of people thought the Jets had addressed some of those concerns in the offseason. With the weapons that they have, drafting Elijah Moore, signing Corey Davis, Mekhi Becton going into his second year, Verrett Tucker, the trade up for Verrett Tucker, everybody thought that left side was solidified. Sometimes it just doesn't quite play out like it does in the offseason. Much like us fantasy players, you're looking at your roster thinking it's sexy, and then bad stuff happens.
Yeah. But at a certain point, bad stuff happens. When it's a habit, that's an organizational problem. Like Washington got raided by the FBI the other day. That stuff doesn't happen at well-run organizations. But it seems to be that Washington can't keep themselves out of the news. Like,
really?
At some point, At some point, you've got to sit there and go, what are you doing as an organization to be better? You look at someone like Pittsburgh, they've got a quarterback with half an arm and they're still finding ways to be there or thereabouts. Whereas organizations like New York, the Giants, they had players quitting during training camp. They had, fights. They had players threatening to walk out. They're just not a well-run organization, and the Jets aren't much better, it seems.
I have faith in the Robert Saleh era, and I'll turn some things around there. So I'm a believer. I think Douglas and Saleh will get that ship right. It hasn't looked pretty early in the season for the Jets, but their first win last week, and we saw Zach Wilson make some of the throws that saw him, that was the reason that he got drafted 2 overall.
Yeah,
I still can't get over looking at his face because he looks like he's 15 years old. It still trips me out, but I think they'll be okay. Matt, top 3. So who's new there? Who you believe in, and who's pretending? Top 12 quarterbacks.
Look, new that I believe in, and it's probably because I have so many shares. Jalen Hurts, happy to see him sitting at number 3. Could be so much higher. He did that terrible game, but he's bounced back from that against the underrated Cowboys defense. Look, really happy to see him there at number 3. Probably that is a little bit biased just because I said I do have so many shares. But look, really like that. Daniel Jones, I think Daniel Jones still is a chance to finish as a QB1 this year. I think he had a couple of touchdowns overturned, called back one. He rushed for about 60 yards, and there was an offensive hold on the other side of the field, and there was another one where he threw and that got called back too. So even though, maybe not in real NFL, but we're talking fantasy, right? So for the rest of the year, I think he's a chance to finish as a QB1. Probably, look, I'm not sure who doesn't belong, but I'm a little bit surprised at Dak Prescott sitting down at number 12. I think that's probably a testament to the Cowboys' defense, right? Especially after week 1 where they threw the ball 800 times. They've just pulled their reins back a little bit, I feel. And, he's still sitting pretty as a QB1, but no one drafted him to finish 12, right? We all thought he'd be 2, 3, or 4 if he came back from injury was sort of the only question, and he's done that really well. So for me, that's just a little bit surprising how good that Cowboys defense is, and they've just sort of taken the foot off the throttle a little bit in terms of throwing.
My big concern with Hurts, and Benny's been subjected to my rants about how good Jalen Hurts is since he was benched for Tua. But my concern with Hurts is at the moment Philadelphia had 3 picks in the top 9. Like, I don't think if Hurts oversees this team to be, a 5-win team, I just can't see them not taking a QB somewhere in that top 9. That's my concern. I think he's good enough to be a franchise quarterback, but I just can't see them not taking a quarterback in that draft with 3 of the top 9 picks.
Look, Jalen Hurts wasn't somebody that I believed in. He's definitely proven me wrong. So I'm prepared to eat some crow there. To be honest, I think that he looks pretty legitimate. I mean, he's had 1 bad game in 4, but then so is Aaron Rodgers, right? But you're right, he's not winning. And is he putting up stats only because he's throwing the ball so much? I don't know. I'm not, I'm not a quarterback whisperer or some film guru. I'm not the person to really answer that question. Yeah. But it still doesn't feel like Philadelphia are all in on Hurts, though, does it?
No. Like as I said, like I'd hoped that he'd get traded to Houston or something like that, where he wouldn't have to worry about, that where an organization would be a little bit more willing to, run with him. But that they just don't seem settled on anything. Like, they're not using Sanders in the way that we all sort of expected Sanders to get used after his rookie year. The wide receivers, well, we all know that they've struggled to actually use a wide receiver. Smith looked better than a lot of the receivers that have gone there, but Rager has struggled. Like, even post Ertz, like we thought Goddard was going to take a huge step forward, but he, in the last couple of years hasn't become what we thought he was going to become post Ertz. Like,
well, it's not post Ertz yet in Philadelphia, is it? Goddart's still there.
He's not dead yet.
Ertz is still there. But
yeah,
in relation to Hurts, I mean, he throwing the ball, he's not the same quarterback that I saw at Oklahoma. He's come leaps and bounds since the guy who was throwing the ball in college football. It looks completely different to me. He just looks much improved throwing the ball. But
look, it's all going to depend on what Billy said, what they do with those 3 picks, right? We just don't know. Sometimes we think we know things and we don't. So if they invest in that line and maybe some more receivers or whatnot, we'll find out. But
if the 22 quarterback class was the 23 quarterback class,
a bit different.
Then I'd have some real concern. But I just think that they might try and trade some of those picks and go into the 23 draft with just as much capital as they have now, and give him one more shot, because the 22 quarterback class is not looking fantastic outside of Malik Willis.
Rattler probably doesn't even come out now, right? Or he might not come out.
He probably should stay for another year, and that's just another year of development for Rattler just makes that 23 class stronger. So I could definitely see Philadelphia trying to do that. They definitely look ahead to the future in that way, that type of organization. So I could see them trying to trade a couple of those picks to go into that 23. I mean, even just trade back, still have a first, pick up more firsts. Yeah. And just go into that 23 draft with capital.
I think as an organization they needed to follow Miami's model, like, and actually just be willing to go into the tank. I think Miami really committed to it, and they look like a much better organization post that. And I think we've seen a couple of teams do that recently. They've just embraced the tank and gone for it. And it just feels like Philadelphia is stuck in, the middle of nowhere. Like they're good enough to be okay, but they're not good enough to be good.
He does know a good tank, Bully. I said, Bull does know a good tank.
I do. I commit to the tank. But there's a number of quarterbacks outside that top 12 as well that we didn't expect to be there. Herbert's at 14.
Yeah.
Burrow's at 17.
We'll touch on that in a moment, Bully.
Yeah.
But first, I'm just going to give my take on the quarterback who I don't think is top 12. And sorry, Rich, but I'm going to have to say that I don't think Derek Carr is going to stay there. And it feels cheating because he's quarterback 11. But yeah, I don't think that he's real as a QB1. So I expect that he'll drop back. And much like the guy I think is for real is Matt Stafford. I think come the end of the season, I reckon he'll be up there in the top 5 or 6. And he's starting a run, a nice 3-4 run of being a real top 6 fantasy quarterback for the next 3 or 4 years.
I mean, my thing with Carr is, sorry, go Benny.
No, look,
my thing with Carr is we're not seeing anything that he hasn't done before. He's like the only difference is he's got Ruggs and Edwards there to actually assist. Like his QB rating is pretty identical to what it's been the last 2 years. Like his yards an attempt is up slightly. It's up from 7.9 the last 2 years to 8.2. He's completing more touchdowns. Like he's on track now for about 32 touchdowns, up from sort of 27. But like we've seen him throw 32 touchdowns before. Like he's done it. It's not unheard of. Up until last season, I think he had more MVP votes than Russell Wilson through his career. Like I genuinely think that if Derek Carr went to an organization away from sort of Gruden, I think if we saw him freed, we'd realize he's an underrated quarterback. Because he has put together a pretty good career.
I think he's an underrated quarterback. I just don't think the fantasy points are for real. I just don't think the top 11. I think
he's going to drop from 12 to 14 or 16, right, Benny, you're saying?
Yeah, I think he's going to drop from 11 to, somewhere 16 to 18, I think.
Yeah. Well, that'd be his lowest finish in about 7 years.
I don't think that's right, but I'm not going to go pull it. I can't be bothered. Who do you think is outside, say, the top? I mean, because Herbert, we'd all say we expect guys like Herbert and Burrow to move up. Is there anybody who's outside of that top, say, 18 who you think can really move up?
For me, it's Tannehill. I think Tannehill's just started so poorly. We've seen him be efficient and produce in the past. So I'm hoping they can get their stuff together and he can jump back up into that QB1 range.
Yeah, I got no idea what's happening in Tennessee. Like they just don't look like that team we saw last year. I mean, Derrick Henry's pacing the field, but outside of that, AJ Brown hasn't looked as convincing. Julio's been banged up. Tannehill's struggling. It just isn't looking like that organization of the last 2 years.
So who's your pick outside that top 18, Bully?
For this season, I think Matt Ryan. I think the attempts are there, and he's experienced enough that he'll start to put it together. he's sitting in at QB20 now, and I could see him moving up into sort of that top 12 because there isn't a huge gap at the moment. But, you know, Rodgers is sitting down there at QB18. It's just a matter of whether or not he can, you know, take his head out of his backside and actually, you know, play good football again.
All right. Well, for me, there's two guys that I'm kind of interested in who are outside of that top 18. Jameis Woodson, if Michael Thomas comes off the pup and is healthy and doesn't want to be a head case, I could see that giving Jameis Winston's production a real shot in the arm. He's been outside of that one game where he threw a couple of interceptions. He's been pretty good, but the yards haven't been there. So if the yards come, I think Winston can make a real push up into the top 12. And to me, I think last week was really, really encouraging for Carson Wentz. I think Wentz could come around in that Indianapolis Colts offense. Don't laugh at me, bully. What be like that for?
Mate, I'm not buying any shares of any QB who manages to like hurt both his ankles in one play. Like, what do you do with that?
Michael Pittman looks like a bona fide, top flight wide receiver. I think that changes the dynamic of the whole offense if Michael Pittman is legit. And Wentz can get healthier, not that he's ever really healthy. Look, those are two guys that jump out to me who I think have a lot of potential to move up.
I like it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just
quickly, while we're on quarterbacks, just take 2 seconds. Mac Jones, in the pouring rain, 19 straight completions, ties the most ever by a rookie. I think he ties Tom Brady for his most completions ever. They were short passes, but it was pouring. It was absolutely atrocious, and he's thrown to no one. So just wanted to give my boy Mac some love.
I think the NFL needs to have a rule change where some of these passes that the quarterbacks are getting credited with should be classified as handoffs. It's getting ridiculous.
The only other QB I'll throw out there is what are we doing with Taylor Heinicke?
Nothing. Enjoy the ride while it lasts, and then
I'd be selling him.
Yeah, I'd be selling him if I had him. Unless I was a contender and I needed him, he'd be gone.
And so you don't think if they finish out, if they finish low enough that they, miss out on given it is a very shallow quarterback class, and he has looked, competent. You don't think he has potential for starting next year?
Then it's only next year. I'm just not interested in Tyler Heinicke at all. No interest in him.
Just too much risk for me. I think you can sell him with that outlook, Bull, that he's the starter now. He's going to be the starter next year, and cash in. That's my view.
If you can get a second for him, I'd just take it all day long. Unless I really, really, and you know what? If I really needed a quarterback, maybe I'd pay a second for him in Superflex. If I really needed a quarterback, but I don't even know if he's going to keep the job once grandfather Fitzpatrick comes back. Right?
Yeah.
So he's just not somebody that I believe in. If I was Washington, I'd be moving heaven and earth to get a quarterback next year. I'd pay whatever I had to move up in the draft. If there was somebody I really liked, or I'd try and go the Sam Darnold route the Panthers did and see who was available. Yeah. And look, I don't know who is, but yeah, Taylor Heinicke, just not interested.
Yeah, fair play.
Running backs. Whew. There's a few surprises here.
Just make sure you got it filled on PPR, boys. When you change over, sometimes it goes back to standard.
Well, it did go back to standard.
Yeah, I don't think it changes that much, but we all play in PPR leagues mostly, right? Not standard. There's a few surprises there.
It's Derrick Henry and the rest.
When you filter back onto PPR, Derrick Henry drops. I can't even say. Where is he? I can't.
No, I think he's still one, isn't he?
He's running back one.
Oh,
He's still 20. He's still nearly 20 points clear.
Yeah.
So disrespected. So he's the most disrespected RB1 in the history of fantasy football.
And he's catching passes this year too, apparently.
He's doing it all.
Yeah, like it's an interesting list. Like Edmonds is there at 12. Patterson is somehow there at number 3. And then you've got Saquon,
league winner, Patterson,
down at 10.
Right now, Derrick Henry is on track for 508 total touches. 508.
Anyone else, you'd be scared, right? But
450 rushing attempts and 56 catches.
Yeah.
Look, I can't see that being maintained. I think regression to the mean is inevitable, which I guess goes back to Matt's stance to maybe invest in some Tannehill. Because there's no way they can maintain that he can maintain that workload throughout the course of a whole year. 450 rush attempts. That would be the record. And actually, it's not even right because the ESPN projection is only over 16 games still. So
he had 378 attempts last year.
Yeah.
Rushing attempts.
Yeah. So on that pace, he'd have 40 more rushing attempts than the current record. But you know what? I've actually changed. I actually, for the first time ever, tried to buy Derrick Henry this week. I've got 2 leagues where I'm probably a running back away from genuinely having a go. And I threw offers out there for Derrick Henry. It felt dirty doing it, but
did you get any bites? Because it doesn't feel like it's the time to be buying Derrick Henry right now. I feel like that time has passed, mate.
Yeah, like I thought I'd get close. I got close on one offer, but the other team is also still contending, so they wanted to hold. I tried 2 firsts and Acres in a Devy league, and it was considered, but they still wanted to compete.
Yeah, I mean, 2 firsts in a Devy league. They're really seconds, right? It's like you're not going to get him for 2 seconds in Cam Akers.
Not for a contender.
Yeah.
It's not close if you're a contender.
Yeah.
I bought him in Kraken for a single first last year. Didn't feel good about it, and I tried to move him ever since. But I'm glad I wasn't successful in moving him. And I think most people that have him are going to be contenders, right? If you bought him, you're not going to be a rebuild, or you got him, you're not going to really be a rebuild until you're going to be a contender. They're not going to sell him cheaply.
The problem for the running backs this year for me is the players who are scoring points I'm not comfortable owning or starting, but the players I'm comfortable owning and starting aren't scoring points. Like,
well, but that means you've got to get out of your comfort zone, bully. You've got to adjust, mate. You've got to adjust.
No, but like, in all honesty, I'm not feeling comfortable buying Austin Eckler. I don't think.
So let's get back to the exercise at hand. The guy you're buying and the guy you're selling in the top 12.
Buying, I think you can try and buy DeAndre Swift. I think there's probably enough of a window still to try and get him. The one I'd be trying to buy isn't in the top 12, and that's Jonathan Taylor.
That's the next topic. That's
selling. I mean, you're selling Eckler, you're selling Patterson. You're selling James Robinson.
You got to leave some for us, Bull.
Honestly, I'd be selling most of the list. Like, I just don't think projection-wise, most of that top 12.
Sell all your running backs. Sell them all. 0 RBs, Elliott. Mark Bull.
So there's nobody in the top 12 who you think. So you're saying Swift is for real? Swift someone you still be buying, and you don't want anybody else in the top 12?
Oh, like I'd have a crack with Montgomery or Barkley. I think both of them have dipped a little bit. Barkley, maybe the window's closed now that he's had a decent game again. But I think Montgomery's there's enough disrespect there that he was RB4 last season. He's RB11 now. He's banged up for a few weeks. If you can get him now and you can cover him for the next few weeks with a Cordarrelle Patterson or something, he's maybe not a bad option. But it's a little bit of a murderer's row at the moment, this running back room.
Matt, who are you buying and who are you selling out of the top 12?
Look, I think Bull's touched on just about everyone. So just winding up, Bully. Look, DeAndre Swift is already going ADP as the running back 2 overall in Dynasty. So that's pretty amazing for me. I think I'd be looking to buy Patterson just because of the price you'll pay. I think he's going to produce again this game. There's no one else there at Atlanta, so if you want to buy him now. But all these other names on here, you're going to be paying overs. I think to buy a running back, it's already going to cost you a lot just because there's not that much depth, right? And if they're a top 12 running back to buy him, you're going to be paying big dollars. In terms of selling, probably Austin Eckler, just because he does look a little bit banged up again. But he's on the he's getting a little bit older, isn't he? So you're probably not going to get what you want for him. But being the RB2 in PPR, maybe now's a good time to sell. I think he came off last game and missed a bit of time, but he came back in and finished the game. Still scored well, but just that injury history and him being banged up the last game, I think now's the time. If you're not a contender, obviously if you're a contender, just hold him. He's going to produce. But if you're looking to rebuild or you're not a strong, top 3 or 4 overall points, I'd be trying to move him on. How about you, Benny?
Look, for me, one guy who I'd like to sell is Kareem Hunt, just because the situation he produces, but the situation with Cleveland, you never feel great starting him because you never know how the rushing attack's going to pan out, and even though he's ahead of Chubb here by 2.2 points a game, Chubb's got that more secure week in, week out role, and I never feel great putting him in my lineup personally, just because you never know how that game script is going to pan out. So he's one who I would like to sell if I could, and unless you're like a really solid contender, I think James Robinson is giving you that chance to sell again. I'm sure that you'd be in on selling James Robinson, Matt, unless you're massive contender.
Yeah, look, I think so. I think that 2 touchdown game I think he scored 2 touchdowns last week, right?
Mm-hmm.
That bumped him up a little bit. You saw Trevor Lawrence have a couple of short yardage runs too, so that's probably going to steal a bit of production off him. And then you got Travis Etienne there and Carlos Hyde, so who knows what that organisation is going to do. But yeah, probably sitting there at RB9 again. If you're not a massive contender, you can make a move.
But yeah, I definitely think the guy to buy in that top 10 is Saquon. If you can if you can do it, I think he stands out like a sore thumb to me.
Look, they've really done well. New York just bringing him back out. The way they brought him back, they've limited him. He's had a couple of breakout runs where he's 30, 40 yards, and they've just kept him under wraps. So I think I like that take.
All right. So who's the guy? The one guy? Just one guy? Outside of the for running backs, we'll just say outside the top 12 because it's all pretty close together. Who's the one guy outside the top 12 who you're buying?
JT.
You know what?
JT for me.
Yeah. JT for you?
It's got to be JT. Just we saw it last year. He started slowly and and got stronger. And I see the same again this year. I'm hoping.
Do you think the price has really dropped on JT? Because I'd say that it hasn't.
No, look, it hasn't. I don't think it has. But if you can get him a little bit cheaper, I'll be looking to buy him.
Bully? One.
One. I'd be trying to get some Kenneth Gainwell. I think he's still cheap enough, and they seem pretty determined to get him there. I think every single running back touch in Philadelphia, bar 2, has gone to Sanders or Gainwell. And you know what? I liked him in college. He can run between the tackles. He can catch. But I think he's still cheap that you can buy him for a late second. If you're a contender. Obviously your premiers like Jonathan Taylor and that, while they're, if you've got a window, grab them. But I think Kenneth Gainwell offers some real value, with what he's producing. And the window that Sanders might not be there.
Sorry. All right. Well, look, let me give you I'll say the one guy that I am buying. If I can get Antonio Gibson at a discount, I'd be buying Gibson all day. Yeah, I know you're laughing at me, Bully, but he's still a mid RB2 despite not having any monster games yet. And I think the monster games are going to come for Gibson because I think he's the most dynamic weapon in that offense. And, you know what, Bully? I'm going to give another one because I'm the host and I can. And I'm going to say Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think the Chiefs are starting to realise that we have to run the ball a bit more. Our defense isn't good enough to be flying up and down the field all day. We need to take some pressure off the defense by running the ball. And you've seen that the last 2 weeks. So if people are still thinking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire in terms of his first 2 weeks, or they don't think this is real, he's also somebody that I'll be buying.
I like that. I heard a couple of podcasts just hating on the situation, hating on his outlook or whatnot. But that's under the assumption that KC stay doing what they're doing. I think you're right, but I think they're going to run the ball more. And if they do, then obviously his outlook's he's going to jump right back up into that RB1 range.
Any other comments on the running backs before we move on? And no, Bull, you can't buy everybody outside the top 12.
Well, I was just having a look while we're off camera because I am trying to buy a running back in that in Down Under. I was just wondering what you'd be selling Kareem Hunt for if you were selling him.
Oh, look, I don't know. I haven't. It's not something I've pondered. But he is available.
On-air trade. On-air trade, people.
Feel free to make an offer, Bully.
All right, Akers or Hunt?
Oh, Hunt. Akers is, I am really, really concerned about that injury. Okay. And as a contender, like I'm like top of the table in that league. I'm not going to trade an RB, a guy who's performing at RB1 for a guy who's on the injured reserve. Come on, man, get your shit together. But one guy, you know what? Before we move on, I'm buying Darrell Henderson for the rest of the year. For the rest of this season, I have no idea what's going to happen next season, but I'd be buying Darrell Henderson for the next of the year. Yes, Billy, I gave 3. I know. I did.
You did buy him off me. Let's talk about Damian Harris too. Why? Because he was also traded in that trade. What's the outlook for Damian Harris, guys? I think he's my most owned player. I'm in 17 leagues or 18 leagues, and I've got like 12 shares of him or something ridiculous. But he just has not produced to date.
Yeah, but he's the guy. He needs the carries, and unless he's going to get the carries, unless they're going to keep feeding him, I just don't know how he's going to go. I love his talent. I don't really think that Damian Harris is, at least as a runner, is really any far behind Josh Jacobs and Najee Harris. I think he's just as talented as those guys. And what he produced in Alabama was just as equal to them, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
His O-line's been really banged up, right? Like there's so many starters out.
They got four starters out.
If that gets healthy towards the championship rounds, maybe he's a sneaky buy too. But
he could be a sneaky league winner in the back half of the year. Damian Harris
could be
right up there with Darrell Henderson. But before we move on to the wide receivers, today's episode is brought to you by Primetime Sports Talk, your top source for all major sports content, including DFS, fantasy advice, great gambling tips. Be sure to head to Primetime Sports Talk to check out their in-depth analysis, exclusive articles, fascinating interviews, and explore the rest of their amazing podcast family. Again, primetimesportstalk.com, your go-to spot for sports content. And while we've stopped, let me just tell you about our Patreon over at Toilets to Titles. So tier 1 is $3 per month. That gets you in the T2T group chat. The tier 2 is $5 per month. That gets you early access to our waiver wire episodes, entry into our Frankenstein Listener League, and T2T team group chat. And then tier 3 is $10 per month, and that gets you one-on-one roster analysis, free entry into our Frankenstein Listener League, T2T team group chat, early access to the waiver wire episodes. Yeah, so some details for you there, guys. And
nice read. Nice.
Hey, I'm getting better. Let's move on to the wide receivers, which I always find wide receivers fascinating because there's just so much depth.
Yeah.
And the standard PPR. Yeah. All right. So, Bully, who you buying? Who you selling? Wide receivers. Let's all do one at each, and then if we got enough time, we'll come back here.
We're still looking in the top 12.
Yep. So who you buying in the top 12? Who you selling in the top 12?
My sell would probably be Mike Williams, although I don't own him. I just think there's enough with that scenario that for what you could probably get for him at the moment to someone that's less cautious. I think for me, he's the obvious sell. And I'm probably buying Terry McLaurin. When you look at the group of receivers he's around, his value is still significantly lower than the receivers around him. And he's the clear alpha on that offense. He's proven now that he can, compete with no one around him. And I just think his value is still significantly lower than those receivers that are with him.
No. Significantly lower. Matt, who you buying? Who you selling in the top 12?
I'm buying Brandon Cooks. I think he's underrated. He's in a terrible quarterback situation, and he's still producing. He's still got that little bit of fear about his concussion history as well, which suppresses his price. So I think I'm buying him, and I'm probably looking also to sell him too if I'm not a contender. I think if you need to move on and you're looking to get the most value, he's getting a little bit older. He does have a questionable quarterback room. So I think if I'm winning now and I need a wide receiver in the top 12, he's probably going to cost me the least, him or Thielen. You probably picked him up a lot cheaper than you're going to, McLaurin or a Hill or someone. And yeah, looking to sell it in that top 12. I think Cooks is just one of the older guys and still producing. So I'll try and move on to him.
Nice.
Yeah. I think Cooks is one that even if you've got to overpay slightly, I think he's one that if you're competing, he's a great buy. He's got 4 more 1,000-yard. I think he's got at least 3 more 1,000-yard seasons than Devontae Adams. And you know what? He's done it with questionable quarterbacks. So he's almost one of those, quarterback-proof receivers that if you can find them, almost in the same mold as what Terry McLaurin is becoming. If you can find him.
Davis Mills threw for 87 yards last week, and he still had 9.7 points. So yeah. That speaks to his floor, right? It'd be great if maybe the Texans had a fire sale and shipped him off to a receiver needy team. I'd love to see him back on the Saints again. That'd be awesome. There's a few teams that could really use a wide receiver.
And for all the concern about his injury history, like I think some of it is because it's happened in primetime games like the Super Bowl. His games per season is 10, 16, 16, 16, 16, 14, 15. So he's only had his rookie season where he's missed more than 2 games. Like, I think we have a false narrative to an extent about his injury history.
I think, yeah, you've got a good point there in regards to the narrative. The part of the reason I think people are concerned about him is that the next people are worried that the next concussion could be that could be it for him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, that's people's concern. Is my take. Look, the guy I'm selling, and this is kind of cheating off the back of Russell Wilson's injury, but I'm selling Tyler Lockett because I'm not buying into the Geno Smith era. Even when Wilson is there, Lockett's a very boom-bust wide receiver, right? He has massive games, and then he has games where he does nothing. And that's fine if you're starting him as your third wide receiver, but not if you're starting him as a wide receiver 1 or even a high-end wide receiver 2. I find it infuriating. So if I could get that kind of value for him, he's somebody I'd be moving out from. I don't think that is really a for real finish for Tyler Lockett. I think he's talented, but I think DK's going to have his games and things will even out. The guy I'm buying, I'd DJ Moore. Just buy DJ Moore. I'd overpay now to get him for on my roster long term. I think he's fully for real. I think Sam Darnold's for real. I think they've got something really special happening there potentially, and so he's somebody I'd pay the price for.
Yeah,
to get him on my roster. And you know what? I'm not buying Mike Williams at all. Not at all. I don't believe it. It's all smoke and mirrors.
No.
But DJ Moore, go get DJ Moore. I think, absolutely.
I think he's a good example of someone to buy high, right? It's probably not even buy high.
He's a buy high.
Buy at his right price.
Buy him now for what people would want for him because 12 months from now, I think it'll be a lot higher. I don't think we can move on from the. We have to discuss the Deebo Samuel start though, right?
Yeah.
How? I mean, and especially now that Kittle's out,
he's almost approaching a point for me now with Kittle out where he's in a group of wide receivers that I'd almost be willing to pay multiple firsts for. I've loved him all through, and I made a big point last year of saying the Ayuk love was false because it was without Debo and without Kittle.
I think Deebo Samuel's become what we want AJ Brown to be.
Yeah, he just looks good. And you know what? Like if Lance was starting this week and I hadn't seen last week, maybe I'd have some concerns. But, he lit up for 160-odd yards last week with Lance under center. Like, he looks good. And he's almost he's pushed Kittle out of being the man in that offense, which I didn't think anyone would be able to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like 43 targets to 28 targets, something like that.
Yeah.
Like he's out-targeted him big time. I definitely think he's legit. I don't think he's this legit, like wide receiver 3 overall legit. I mean, he's had 150 yards off 2 plays, but I think he's real. How about you, Matt?
I think Ayuk comes back in and just takes a few of those touches away towards the second part of the year. I always thought he's probably the guy in San Francisco, more maybe a 1A, 1B. I didn't think it was Ayuk was the out and out number one there. I didn't think he'd go this high as to wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, every chance he finishes as a wide receiver 1 for the year, I think, especially with that Kittle injury. We don't know how long that's. I mean, it's 3 games, right? But it could be longer.
Minimum 3 games.
Minimum 3 games. Yeah. I like him with Trey Lance too. Trey Lance comes in. I think that yards after catch is still going to be pretty high. So I still like him with Trey Lance.
Yeah.
What about Allen Robinson, boys? Wide receiver 60. How are we feeling about Robinson? Is that just Nagy?
I don't know. I don't even know what to say. Like, I thought he's been another one that we thought was QB proof throughout his career, but he's just not looked good this year. And I don't even know what to do. I don't know if he's a buy now. I don't know if he's his price has almost dropped to the point where because of his age, you can get him for a second. But
you couldn't sell him, could you? You'd be taking a massive loss if you did. Would you sell him for a second if you own him? I don't think I'd sell him for a second if I owned him.
Not if you're a contender.
Yeah, I think if you're competing, you might be able to. The move to make is maybe Allen Robinson for a Marvin Jones and a second or something like that. Get an aging receiver that's going to give you some production now and hope that pick turns into something. If you're rebuilding, maybe he's a buy and hope he comes good. I can't see Nagy lasting to next season, but who knows? I just don't feel comfortable on either side of him at the moment, and I do own an amount of him, yeah.
There's potential there for him to come good, isn't it? If Fields steps his play up a little bit, Nagy does move on. There's a bounce back there for him.
Wide receiver. I mean, how do you even value unless they're in this 20-point range? How do you even value a receiver who's in the 17, like 17, 18-point range? Because even some of these guys down here, in the 20s and even in the 30s, they're on like Michael Pittman is wide receiver 32, and he's on track for 90 catches and 1,100 yards. And he's wide receiver 32. Yeah. Like, how do you even value these wide receivers now in this passing league? Like, it's just it's something that I kind of struggle with, because you think, oh yeah, that guy's got he's going to get 1,100, 1,200 yards. He's a wide receiver too. No, he's not.
But I think I've sort of I build my teams very wide receiver heavy, and try and get like 1, maybe 2 good running backs in there. And I mean, if you look at the wide receivers that are around Allen Robinson, you've got Juju is 2 spots ahead of him. Jalen Reagor is 5 spots behind him. Julio is 1 spot behind Reagor. Edwards is 1 spot behind Julio. Higgins is 2 spots later. Like, they're guys that we were drafting to be studs in the last 12 months. Like, I think, there's so much depth at wide receiver now that you almost just need to get as many of them as possible that you have faith in. And when they go on that hot streak, that's when you start them.
Wide receiver is the one difference that it changes massively when you go from standard to PPR, or even PPR to half PPR. It's a big change.
Yeah.
I mean, like Corey Davis in PPR is wide receiver 20. In standard, he jumps up to wide receiver 15. I mean, PPR, and he's on track for 12 touchdowns, based off what he's done in the first 4 games. It's obviously catching passes is a king in PPR leagues, right? Yeah, absolute king. So who? I mean, Matt mentioned Allen Robinson. I don't know. Are you actually trying to buy Allen Robinson, Matt? Is he someone you'd be trying to buy outside of the top 12?
Yeah, probably I would. Just for those reasons I mentioned, I think he's got a good up and coming quarterback. I think Nagy, hopefully he's on the move, and we've seen him produce so many times before that he's probably not going to get cheaper than what he is now already because of his age and now his production. It's a good time to buy and hope for a bit of a bounce back.
I mean, look, we're still at the point where looking at these 4-game sample sizes, even one big game can kind of, prop somebody up, right, in the rankings, or one bad game can prop them down. Bull, who are you buying outside the top 12?
One. I'll throw one out there that I'm coming around on, and I think you can buy cheap, and that's Hunter Renfrow. He's probably the only Vegas receiver that I'm comfortable starting. Putting up nearly 15 points a game without a monster game. It's been a consistent week-to-week one, whereas, I think if you look at the receivers around him, they are having one good week, one bad week. And I think he's cheap still. I don't think he's going to cost you a heap. I don't know if he's got the hugest amount of upside, but if you're looking for someone you can plug into that wide receiver 3 slot and get, 10 to 15 points every week, he's a good little option.
Look, this again feels like CD Lamb is wide receiver 28. I don't know how much of a discount you could get on him, but I'd certainly be trying to buy him.
I think there's a lot of those receivers that you're not getting a discount on, like Lamb's at 28, Waddle's at 34, Devonta's at 37, Rondale Moore's at 46, Cortland Sutton's at 47. I just don't know if you're getting a discount on them.
AJ Brown is all the way down at wide receiver 78. Right? And I mean, how much of a discount are you really going to get on AJ Brown? I don't think it'd be much of a discount.
Be zero.
Yeah,
right? I don't think it'd be much. But at the same time, like how much do you want to go out and buy a top dynasty wide receiver when, like Devonta Adams and Stefan Diggs were just fields above everybody else last year, right? Just miles in front. Adams, they've both dropped back to the pack now.
Yeah.
I mean, Adams is wide receiver 8 in PPR, 18 points a game. Diggs is down at, wide receiver 19 now.
Yeah.
It just changes so much every year.
Yeah. I think the production changes, right? But the value, maybe not so much. Different with AJ Brown, just because he has such a bad injury run. I think he's playing this week, but probably won't be 100%. But he's still young, right? Whereas these other guys, they're still a little bit older. So production doesn't really matter, does it? Really?
I think Diggs is one I might be looking. I think Diggs might almost be one that I'm looking to acquire. I think some of his production issues, is a little bit linked to Josh Allen's slow start. He's still down there on points, but the last couple of weeks he's started to be a little bit more relevant again. So I think he's one that if you can get any kind of discount, because the targets are there. Like, 13 targets, 8 targets, 10 targets, 11 targets. Like, he's still in double-digit targets. It's just they're not quite clicking in the same way. So I do think you're going to get some regression where that's going to tidy itself up as the season goes on. So I think players like that, where you look for the target share, and if the target share is there, that's who I'd be looking to acquire.
I think he's number 6 in overall targets for the year. Overall players, he's number 6. So,
yeah,
saying something.
Yeah, like that's going to tidy itself up in the coming weeks. Like, And if you can get him at a discount, go for it. Just bear in mind that he's also a 29-year-old receiver as well, I think. So,
all right, so let's quickly touch on the tight ends. It's they're a bit more congested. So top 12, who are you buying? Bull, who are you selling?
Mike Gesicki. I'm buying Gesicki.
Of course you are.
He's tight end 11.
You can't buy him everywhere.
He's tight end 11 on the season, but that was with a donut in week 1. When you take out that donut, he's tight end 4. And he's been on a tear. I'm probably selling someone like there's 2 there, but I'll only take 1, and I'm probably selling Dawson Knox. I just don't think at tight end 6, I don't have him in that range. And if you can get anywhere near that value, that's who I'd be looking to move. Yeah.
Nice.
They'd be the 2 for me.
Matt, who are you buying? Who are you selling?
Look, I'd be tempted to say Travis Kelce just because of his age. He's the clear number 1 there. You could probably pick him up cheaply, but I'm going to go with Gronk. I'll wait to see how he bounces back from this injury, but I just think he's an integral part of that team. I think he's going to be a red zone threat, and he's so old, and you have that injury history that you could probably pick him up for cheap. In terms of selling, yeah, I don't know. Look, I don't believe in Dawson Knox, so yeah, I'd probably just cheat and go with bullies.
Fair. Buying, I'd buy Noah Fant if you can get a discount.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me, Fant. I think for me, Fant's one to try and buy later in the season. I don't think he's going to have a top sort of 10 tight end year. I think he's going to struggle in that offense just because it's not.
He's tight end 7 right now. So yeah. I can't really see him dropping outside. I don't see him dropping outside of the top 10. I think he's got the potential to get up into the top, top 4. I think he's got that kind of potential.
Yeah.
I think Alberto's out too as well.
Yeah, Alberto is out now as well for a few weeks. Rich is in the chat. He's saying sell Waller.
Jeez.
And look, that may be a good call based off the improvement that we're seeing from Edwards and Ruggs, right? Like it doesn't seem Waller will keep up the target share that he's had if Ruggs and Edwards keep improving at the rate that they are. I like that one, Rich. It's a good one.
Just someone check if Rich is all right. He might be held hostage, or maybe coaches hacked his account or something. But he wants to sell a Raiders player. All's not well.
Yeah.
I'd almost have Waller as I did before the season. Have Waller as my tight end 1. He's that little bit younger than Kelce, and I don't think I've seen anything to change him. Like Kelce's going to outperform him, but I don't know how much more life you're getting in Kelce. At some point, he will drop off.
I would be selling Dalton Schultz.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, he's sneaky in there at number 4, isn't he? That's he's jumped up in any given Sunday. It could be him or Jarwin, really, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Jarwin in the second half of the season or for the next quarter.
I think we've seen Schultz secure that he's the one there. Like, and he did a lot of that last year. Like he was pretty convincing last year, in a anemic offense. My only thing is his contract, situation. He's off contract at the end of this year, and if he's not in that organization, I don't know if I value him as highly. But he's looked good this year and last year, but there is that contract situation that does make me worry.
But he started off hot last year, and then obviously Dak got injured, and his production wasn't quite the same. But look, I think CD is going to turn it on. I think Cooper's going to get his, and Dalton will come back to the pack. I'll tell you what, guys, TJ Hawkinson might be going to tight end 1 for me. Just putting it out there. Tight end 1 overall. TJ Hawkinson.
They just need a.
So I was just saying, it's not Pitts.
I would not trade Hawkinson for Pitts.
You couldn't now, could you? You couldn't now.
I wouldn't, but
Pitts is still a guy for me.
I don't think you could get Pitts for Hawkinson still. I think that's how crazy the Pitts hype still is. I don't think you could get Pitts for Hawkinson.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't make that trade anyway. I would prefer to have Hawkinson than Pitts, just based off where those two organisations are at the moment.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I just can't buy into Hawkinson until they work out what's happening at quarterback. Like, I'd rather have Matt Ryan, even as he ages, than Goff. Like,
Goff's been fine though. Goff's been able to support Swift and Hawkinson, and they're clearly the 1 and 2 weapons there in that offense. So, love and life. I think, yeah, just his age and how productive he's been. I just think it's starting the ascent to tight end 1, TJ Hawkinson, the Hawk baby. All right, so Matt and I, just prior to last week's episode, made a big trade. Thought we'd save it for this show. This trade was in the Console Wars Dynasty League, multi-copy league, 3 copies of each player, 36 teams in the league. Players are allowed across divisions, can't have the same player on the roster twice. Matt, do you want to take the people through the trade?
Yeah. So it was, I think I gave up a fair bit, but I got a fair bit back. I was pretty happy with it. I think it worked well for both sides. So I gave up Damian Harris, Darrell Henderson, Brandon Cooks, and DeAndre Hopkins for AJ Brown, who is my wide receiver 1 still. 2020 second first, which is probably going to be a late first after this trade, and a 22 third. So Harris, Henderson, Cooks or Hopkins for a first, a third, and AJ Brown.
Yeah, so look, my thoughts behind the trade were, I still believe in AJ Brown as a top flight dynasty asset. I just don't know if this year's going to be the year that we all projected that we thought it would be. They're going to keep giving the ball to Derrick Henry. I feel like I can contend in this league, or at least finish in the money. And I thought I'm giving up AJ Brown. I'm getting back to DeAndre Hopkins, who I think they'll have similar production over the course of the year. Hopkins is actually currently 4th in targets on that Arizona offense, so that's a bit worrying. But regression to the mean, I think he'll come back. Brandon Cooks, we've talked about Cooks. I think he's a lock to finish as a low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2. Really needed some additional depth in this league, especially at running back, and that's what Henderson and Harris gave me. Henderson looks like he's going to be, low end RB1, high end RB2 as long as he's healthy in that offense. And who's to say, look, we don't know what role he's going to have next year after this year with Akers coming back, etc. But it looks to me like he's carved out a role going forward, regardless of how well Akers recovers, which was really one of my fears in holding Akers, to be honest, is that Henderson would do this and show that he deserves a role in the offense. So that was really my reasoning behind the trade, is to add some depth and get that production, and every week counts. I was able to start Hopkins last week. I wasn't able to start AJ Brown, and maybe that is different for the future throughout the season. But I'm excited to see. Sorry, Matt.
No, you wrap up, mate.
I'm just excited to see how this one plays out.
Yeah, for me, the first 2 years I was a contender. I think I just missed the finals. Year one, made it year two. And this league is only the top four of each division make the playoffs. It's not top six. You have to be top four just to make it, and then you're playing some pretty heavy teams. So I made some moves. I bought CD Lamb in the off season. I flagged that I was selling Hopkins. I think he was on my trade bait for like 10 months, and wasn't getting any bites for him. Not producing, getting older, and I was committed to a rebuild. So during the draft, I couldn't even get an offer for a single first for Hopkins. That's how ageist we all are, as we all know. I was a bit surprised. I thought I would have got something in draft. I guess it's not a time to sell a veteran in draft. So just held him until I got a decent offer. Probably would have liked to chuck a second in there too. I think it would have been a bit more even with the second, but potential points means I get some of these guys off my roster too, which moves my first a little bit earlier as well. So there's that to take into consideration. Maybe I could have rejected the trade and my potential points blow out a bit more, and that cost me, a couple of spots. So yeah, look, happy with the trade. I said probably lost a little bit of value, but I think looking back at the trade this time next year, I think potentially we'll both be happy. Maybe you win the league or are pretty strong in the league, Benny, and in the value wise, I think I've got CeeDee Lamb now. I've got AJ Brown, got an extra first, and I've been looking to rebuild in this league, so this sort of gets it done for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of in a position where I'm like, because the strength of this league is so strong, and like Matt mentioned, only the top four from each division get to the finals. I was kind of in the same position where you kind of push the chips in, or you start selling things off, and I just thought that this trade put me in a position to really compete, be able to withstand some injuries if they happen throughout the season. And I thought, for the immediate future, the next 2 or 3 years, Hopkins and AJ Brown would give similar production. And just the way Kyler Murray is playing made me feel really, really safe, kind of making that trade for Hopkins. And the way Brandon Cooks was playing as well. So, yeah, maybe it's one to look back on at the end of the year and tell everybody how it planned out. I think if I don't make that trade, I might miss the playoffs and I finish, 6-7. I get a middle round. I have a middle round first in a fairly weak draft class.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the division that you and I are in, it is a tough division. Like, I think you're back in 8th or 9th, and you've got third most potential points in our division. Like, I'm in 5th with the second most. So I think we've got a fairly tough division to try and get through on. Like, so something had to do the week before. I made a move for Zeke as well, just because we are in a solid division.
I've got Deshaun Watson too, so my sort of QB room's a bit depleted as well. So that's another reason for me to rebuild. Just having him and Roethlisberger, being it is what it is. I don't think I was really much of a chance to compete this year. So,
yeah, I mean we're both higher in potential points than the two teams sitting at 4-0.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Some pretenders there.
There's definitely some pretenders here. So it'd be good to see how it plays out over the course of the year. I think that. Yeah. I mean, I'm 2-2 now. After starting the season 0-2, but I think that trade puts me in a really good position.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, was there anything else you guys wanted to touch on before we let the viewers go? I mean, we've already gone 75 minutes. Probably best to knock this one on the head.
Yeah. I'd say that's it for the week.
All All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If you tuned in and if you listen later on, thanks for listening later on. Peace out.
All the best.